Hello traders, welcome to the Nexoel Trading Hub YouTube channel. So we're going to be looking at the weekly forecast for the coming week, and we're starting off from the dollar index. This is the monthly time frame. If you can clearly remember, we identified the monthly bullish fair value gap months ago, where we saw price traded into that, taking out the sell side liquidity, and we saw volume went above the monthly bullish fair value gap. So we expected a bullishness for the bearish continuation. So the month of June candle or price delivery have not yet been fully established, but what we can see is that volume is trading below the monthly bullish fair value gap. So we know we've been seeing bearish momentum in the dollar index. So we could expect to see furthermore possibility of bearish push to actually fulfill this particular monthly candle, which is for the month of June. So let's check the weekly time frame. So here in the weekly time frame, what we can clearly see is this is the monthly bullish fair value gap zone, and we can look clearly to the delivery we saw here, how we had the interpretation of this void where price traded below that, fulfilling the void we had here. Price closed the void, but then we have price return to retest and the bearish continuation. So you know, from the 4-hour time frame and also the daily time frame, we identify relatively equal high points here. And what we can see is that price reacting at the monthly bullish fair value gap zone with volume trading above the mean threshold, or what we call the consequent encroachment. And therefore, last week, I told us to expect to see a bullish movement to seek the relatively equal high points. And then we can see the bearish continuation to the downside, because now we can see price took out sell side liquidity and we have relatively equal highs resting here as buy side liquidity. So the expectation is to see how price was going to trade to the upside to take out the high points, the equal high points, which we saw from the daily time frame and as well from the 4-hour time frame. And once price took out the buy side liquidity, which are the equal highs, we saw the bearish movement to the downside. Clearly now, from the weekly time frame, we can clearly see that volume has traded below the monthly bullish fair value gap zone, because this is the close price of this weekly delivery. So I'm expecting to see the possibility of further bearish movement in the dollar index. So we may see price return to the upside into this candle week to retest this candle week, because in the lower time frame we're going to see the possibility of a sponsorship zone, or we could see price mitigate the volume, the open price of this bullish colored candle, and we would see the possibility of the bearish continuation, meaning price should respect the main threshold of this monthly bullish fair value gap, in which we're seeing here in the weekly time frame. So let's check the daily time frame to look at the narrative. So here in the daily time frame, you can clearly see the equal high points we spoke about last week, which I told us to see the possibility of price trading to seek this equal high points, acting as buy side liquidity. Price took out the sell side liquidity. So we would see the buy side liquidity taken, and then we have the bearish continuation to the downside. Clearly now we can see that got fulfilled. Price seeked the equal highs, and then we had the fall of price to the downside. So we have this daily bullish fair value gap. So this is going to act as an inversion fair value gap, and it's a valid inversion fair value gap because this sponsored movement to the upside that seeked this buy side liquidity. Here we had a bullish volume. So we further had bullish impulse to the upside, seeking the buy side liquidity, the equal highs, and now price reversed to the downside, violating this daily bullish fair value gap. We can see how volume closed below that and further sponsored bearish movement to the downside. So clearly for the coming week, I'll be expecting to see how price would trade to fill up this liquidity void we have here. So we'll be looking at the possibility of how volume may trade above this, and then we could see price retest this to further trade into this other void, and then we have the bearish continuation to the downside. So clearly this is the narrative I'm showing us from the daily time frame, meaning we want to see price acts within this zone, respecting this monthly bullish fair value gap as an inversion fair value gap to sponsor bearish continuation to the downside. And what we can see is that we have this liquidity void, this liquidity gap here, and we also have this liquidity gap here. So what I'll be expecting to see is the push of price to the upside. And when price pushes to the upside, we have strong volume. We may see a sharp retest of that to further sponsor bullishness into this other liquidity gap we have here. and then we have the bearish continuation. So if price is going to trade more higher, we may see price weak into this inversion fair value gap to mitigate that, and then we have the bearish continuation to the downside. So basically, this is the narrative I'm showing us from the daily time frame. So let's check the 4-hour time frame to look at the narrative from the 4-hour time frame. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can clearly see is that the zone we identify from the daily time frame, this liquidity gaps, we have this other one here also. We can also clearly see we have gaps here in the 4-hour time frame also. So this is the daily inversion fair value gap. In Confluence, we have a 4-hour bearish fair value gap here. So for the coming week, I'll be looking at this possibility of seeing how price goes bullish, and then we may see price retest this into this zone, and then we have the bearish continuation to the downside. So for price to really now trade more higher into this zone, it means we would want to see bullish volume here, want to see high volume bullishness here that would sponsor a bullish movement to also into this liquidity gap we have here. And just the way I pointed out from the daily time frame, we could see it more weak into this, and then we have the bearish movement of price to the downside. So this is the first possibility I'm looking forward to, or what we could see is how price would trade into this, and we would see price react at this bearish order block, and we have the bearish fall of price to the downside. So clearly we have this bearish order block here in the 4-hour time frame. So we may see price trade into that because we also have this bearish fair value gap, and then we have what the bearish continuation to the downside in the dollar index without price necessarily having to fill up this other void resting here. So we may see that reaction, bullishness to this bearish order block, and we have the bearish continuation of price to the downside, except price decide to seek this buy side, and then we have what price mitigate the zone, and we have the bearish continuation of price to the downside. So I'm still looking to bearish delivery in the dollar index, except we have a complete change in narrative where price possibly trade more higher and then begin to violate this zone here. So this is what I have to show us in the dollar index. Let's check out the Euro USD pair, guys. This is Euro USD, and this is the weekly time frame. So what we can clearly see from the weekly time frame, we identified this as a draw on liquidity. Last week, we wanted to see how price was going to take this buy side liquidity into this bearish fair value gap here in the weekly time frame, and we can clearly see price took out this drawn liquidity buy side into this weekly bearish fair value gap. Though what we can see is that price mitigated just the low of the fair value gap, but what we can see is we have bullish volume. So we first identified that we have this bearish fair value gap in which here price mitigated, fell to the downside. Now we can see price return into this institutional order flow, the volume of this buy movement before the sell movement to the downside. Price mitigated that and fell, and now I've traded above that. What we can see is price here return to retest that as an inversion and then sponsor the bullishness to the upside, in which in the daily time frame we identified that we had an unmitigated bullish fair value gap in the daily time frame. So what we can see is the mitigation of that and the bullish continuation of price to the upside. So clearly for the coming week, if we are expecting and seeing to the possibility of bearish movement in the dollar index, then we know in the euro we want to see bullishness to the upside. So clearly it means I'll be expecting to see the possibility of more bullish continuation to the upside in the Euro USD. So we have that in our view, but then we must understand that we would see the possibility of price reacting here to give us the bearish movements before we have that bullish continuation to the upside. So we have now to check the narrative in the daily time frame. So here in the daily time frame, what we can clearly see is this is the weekly zone. We identify the weekly bearish fair value gap. So you can see within the inversion fair value gap in the weekly time frame, we can see that is where we have this daily bullish fair value gap, in which we can see that price return to mitigate that and the bullish movement of price to the upside. So what we can see is that price has not yet fully mitigated this weekly bearish fair value gap. So we may see price trade into that, and then we have a fall to the zone and we have the bullish continuation. or we may see price straight to the downside to give us the bullish continuation to the upside. So from the daily time frame, what we have is that we have this down close candle before the bullish movements. So we have the bullish order block here unmitigated from the daily time frame. So clearly now, if price is going to dip more lower to the downside, it means we have price possibly deep into the daily order block, bullish order block before the bullish continuation, or we may see price now deep to this level and we have the bullish continuation. So clearly in the Euro USD, I mean, we're looking to see this possibility of price dropping to the zone here, and then we have the bullish continuation to the upside, or we could see price dip more lower to the downside into this daily bullish order block here, and then we have the bullish continuation to the upside. So these are the two possibilities we could see, the two narrative we could see in the Euro USD. So let's check that narrative now in the 4-hour time frame. So clearly why I'm making reference also to this bullish fair value gap here in the daily time frame is the fact that we have this candle giving us a rejection, the possibility of trading to the downside. So you could see price seek this sell side liquidity and not just this daily candle sell side liquidity, because this candle also had this rejection to the downside after taking the buy side liquidity that is going to be seen in the weekly time frame. So with the expectation that we may see the bearish movement, but then price went bullish. So that is why I'm making reference to this fair value gap, that we may see the possibility of price dropping here and we may have bullish continuation, or we have the deeper pullback into the daily bullish order block. Let's check the 4-hour time frame to have a better picture to that. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can clearly see is this is where we have the daily bullish order block, and we can see here we had this buy movement before the sell movement here to the downside that took out this low and sponsored movement into the bullish zone, which is the bullish fair value gap from the daily time frame, and we had this bullish impulse. You know, last week I called out that we need to take our position bullish from this 4-hour bullish order block. So we can see now when price traded to the upside, failing to respect this rejection block, we had this bullish fair value gap created, and then price returned to retest that, and we can see how volume respected that. So it was from this also zone I also took a trade setup on Tuesday, which, you know, in the Euro USD review, which is already available in the YouTube channel, I spoke about that. I pointed that out to us. So in case you've not watched that video, you can check the description section to this video. The link to that is in the description section. So what we can see is how volume respecting the bullish fair value gap here and went to the upside. So this is the bullish fair value gap we marked from the daily time frame, where we're expecting to see the possibility of bullish continuation if price pulls back to this level, except we see a deeper pullback into the daily zone. So we have breakaway gaps here. So what we can now see from the 4-hour time frame, we have sell side liquidity resting here, and we have this 4-hour bullish order block unmitigated. So it means that I'll be looking at this zone to continue bullish, how price is going to dip to the downside here, and if price gives us the buy model, then we want to go bullish to the upside from this 4-hour bullish order block, except that price dips more lower into the daily zone here. But I'll be keeping an eye on this particular zone, the 4-hour order block zone here, to see the possibility of a bullish model, except that is not clearly established there. Then we would consider to look at the daily order block zone. So we may see this narrative in the market. So price could decide to continue falling to the downside here to seek the sell side before we have the bullish continuation. Or we could see this narrative, price trades here first before returning to the downside to give the bullish continuation to the upside. So I'll be much more focused on the 4-hour order block in reference to this daily bullish fair value gap. Except price violates the zone, then we'll be looking at bullishness from the daily bullish order block. Why are we looking at bullishness? We must understand that the bias, the directional bias, is bullish. So when you see the bearish narrative, you can also trade the bearish narrative, because this is quite a distance or a range from this price level and to where we have this zone. So you can utilize the lower time frame to go bearish to the downside before we have the bullish narrative or bullish model established to want to have a bullish movement to the upside. So this is what I have to show us in Euro USD. Let's check out the GBP USD pair, guys. Here in GBP USD weekly time frame, so we can also see we made reference to the GBP USD bullish fair value gap in the weekly time frame to expect our bullish movement from that zone, and clearly we can see that. So, we've been calling out this trade setup right from where we saw this bullish fair value gap, and we called out bullish continuation. We also identified this bullish fair value gap, bullish continuation, and now also this bullish fair value gap for bullish continuation. So what we can now see is the delivery bullish to the upside after the mitigation of the bullish fair value gap here in the weekly time frame, which we're going to drop to lower time frame to look at the narrative in the lower time frame. So clearly what you can see here from the weekly time frame, price has taken out the buy side liquidity resting here. So this zone is something we mark from the daily time frame. We're going to look at that. So if price has taken out this buy side liquidity and we're expecting the possibility of bullish continuation, it means this is the next drawn liquidity, this buy side liquidity. So for the coming week, we're still bullish in GBP USD also, and we can see how volume is bullish. So price here has established this bullish order block here in the weekly time frame, but then we could see that possibility of what price going bearish first before we have what the bullish continuation. So what we can now see from the daily time frame is this. Here in the daily time frame, we have this narrative. So we can see here that price return into this bearish order block here in the daily time frame in reference to also this fair value gap, or let's say in confluence of the fair value gap, and we had mitigation for the bearish continuation to the downside. So now price is reacting currently at the main threshold of this bearish order block, which is what we are going to see right now here. So we can see prices reacting at the main threshold of the bearish order block. So we could see price dips lower to the downside to seek this candle, this daily candle low points. And we have a fair value gap here, bullish in the GBP USD pair. So for the GBP USD pair, I'll be looking at the possibility of this narrative. So if we're going to have a pullback that is not so deep, we could see price return to the zone, and then we have the bullish continuation to the upside. Or what we could see is that we have a deeper pullback into this bullish fair value gap we can see here in the GBP USD, because what we can see in GBP USD is this price return into the zone we identified, the weekly bullish fair value gap zone from the weekly time frame. Last 2 weeks, I pointed out we have a trend line liquidity here. And now we can see price has taken out this sell side liquidity. This candle traded to the downside, taking out the sell side before we had bullish movement to the upside. So we can identify and establish this as a bullish order block. And here in confluence is a fair value gap. So it means if we are going to have a deeper pullback to the downside, you'll be looking at this zone for our bullish continuation to the upside, or we would look at this zone here, and then we have what bullish continuation to the upside also in the GBP USD. And these two expectations are established also with the lower time frame in view. So if we are looking at just the daily time frame, then it means you'll be looking more to this fair value gap before we have the bullish continuation to the upside. But now let's go to the 4-hour time frame. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can see is in reference to the first daily bullish fair value gap, which also we can see a fair value gap here in the 4-hour time frame. We have this 4-hour bullish order block. Now we can see how price has taken out this high points. Price violated this bearish order block zone, and then price traded back to retest this, to retest the violated bearish order block. So price returned to that. This reclaimed price lower before price continued bullish to the upside. So we could see price react at the 4-hour bullish order block, which is why I pointed to the two possibilities for us to have the bullish continuation. So if we do not have a deeper pullback to the downside to continue bullish, then we're expecting to see reaction at the 4-hour bullish order block. But then if price gives us a deeper pullback, meaning we want to see price trade into the daily fair value gap, which is lower than this other previous daily fair value gap. So you must understand that you have to trade the market with flexibility. You have to identify where price has the possibility to react from, because you can just work with expecting to see price react at this fair value gap, and then price reacts from here and move. So it means you're going to miss that entry. So I'll be looking at this zone. If price gives a deeper pullback, then I'll be looking at this zone here. So what I'm saying is I'm expecting to see how price, possibly we could see price respect this up close candle before this bearishness. Price may trade higher, and then we have price trades to the downside and we continue bullish to the upside, or what we could see is that movement of price and then price dips more lower before we have the bullish continuation to the upside. So this is my expectation in GBP USD, except proven otherwise. So here in US30, this is the weekly time frame. So we can see US30 has been bullish. So we can see bullish movement. So with this, you can make the correlation with the dollar index. So what we can see is how price traded to the downside here into this weekly bullish fair value gap. And then we can see the bullish continuation. So basically this is within the zone of your break and retest. So we can see how price respected the main threshold, respected the bullish fair value gap here in the weekly time frame, and we have the bullish momentum to the upside. We can see price seeked all of this trend line liquidity. So we have the drawn liquidity. Basically then from the weekly time frame, we have this buy side liquidity. First we have this, and then in extension we have this high point here, the all-time high, which is this buy side liquidity resting here. So what we can see is this is the last down close candle. Price further went to the downside into the weekly bullish fair value gap, and we started seeing bullish delivery. Price returned to retest the rejection block and bullish continuation to the upside. So we can see here we have the bullish order block. Price have returned to retest it, because this is our down close candle before we have the bullish movement of price to the upside. So what we can see is the retest of the weekly bullish order block. Here we have this proportion block formed here. So what we can look forward to now is to expect more bullish momentum, because we can see that we are having bullish volume to the upside, and price basically now, let's identify that. I believe volume is trading above this candle bodies. So yeah, we can see volume traded above the volume of these candles. So what we are expecting to see is the possibility now of further bullishness to the drawn liquidity, the buy side draw on liquidity. So what we'll be expecting to see is the possibility of a pullback for a retest of this down close candle before this bullish momentum to the upside. Let's check that in the daily time frame. So here in the daily time frame, what we can clearly see in the daily time frame is the weekly order block in which price have returned to mitigate. Price seek this sell side liquidity. Price went to the upside. Price again returned, seeking this relatively equal low points here, and we have this bullish delivery to the upside. So this is the order block, or let's call the proportion block, because after the mitigation of the order block, so this was formed. So we could see now from the daily time frame, what I'm looking for to see in the US30 is to see how price return to the downside, and we have the bullish continuation to the upside. So clearly this is what I'm looking for to see in US30. And in Confluence, you can see we have a fair value gap to this zone we marked from the weekly time frame. And clearly here we can see here we have this up close candle before we had this bearish movement. Price seek this low, also this low point resting here, and the bullish movements. So if price dips lower, meaning we have the possibility of seeing the movement of price more in reference to this candle before we have the bullish continuation to the upside. Let's check the 4-hour time frame. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can clearly see is we have the movement of price here to the downside. Price seeked the sell side liquidity here. We can see how this low swept the sell side liquidity, relatively equal low points, and then we have the bullish movement of price to the upside. So what we can see is we have this sell movement before the bullish movement, and this would serve more as a draw on liquidity to the downside, a sell side draw on liquidity, which we may expect to see price seek that. So even bearish to the downside, expecting a bearish movement, and in a lower time frame, seeing the narrative to go bearish to the downside. It means I want to trade bearish to see how price will seek the sell side liquidity, and then we have this unmitigated institutional order flow zone. So it means we want to see how price trades to the downside here, and how price is going to give us a reason now to continue bullish to the upside in US30, because we have US30 in a bullish bias. So we want to see how price may seek the buy side liquidity, the external buy side liquidity. And what we can see clearly here is, let's mark out the zone. We have this fair value gap here, bearish. So if that begins to give us a reason to want to go bearish, then we would want to do that and then trade bearish to the downside. This is our bullish zone where we should expect a bullish movement, except price possibly takes out this high points before giving a reason to want to go bearish to the downside. But I am bullish in the US30, and we'll be looking at this institutional order flow zone. So this is what I have to show us in US30. Let's check out the gold pair. Here in gold, what we can see, gold has left the external range liquidity untouched. So gold have not purged this external range liquidity, this all-time high. So what we can see is that we are having the bearish delivery of price to the downside. So we have the sell side liquidity. We're going to clearly see that in the daily time frame. So what we can see is that gold respected this weekly bullish fair value gap and traded to the upside here in the weekly time frame. So clearly it means if we're going to see bearish movements more to the downside, our reference to the downside is the volume here, the open price of this down close candle that gave us bearishness into the sponsorship zone before the bullish movement of price to the upside. So for gold pair, I'm not saying immediately we're going to see price just dip immediately lower to this level we are looking at before we have the possibility of a bullish continuation, but we are identifying the probable zones the price is heading to. So, we were bullish, expecting to see price takes out this external range liquidity, the all-time high, and now we're seeing how prices change in direction to the downside. So let's check the daily time frame. Here in the daily time frame, what we can clearly see is now we have price give us the movement bearish to the downside. We can see how we had a very rough delivery here, and then price returned down to retest this bearish block, and we had this fall of price to the downside. We have this fair value gap created here, and price return mitigated that, respecting the main threshold, and then we had the bearish continuation. Last week I pointed to the possibility of bearish movement also, and in the 4-hour time frame I made reference to a zone, and we're going to look at that in the 4-hour time frame. So clearly now what we can see, the drawn liquidity is the sell side liquidity, and in extension, we have the weekly level we marked. So it means if price seek the sell side liquidity, we may see price wants to continue bearish to the downside to seek this other sell side liquidity. What we can see from the daily time frame is the fact that price respected this bearish fair value gap, and we're seeing this bearish momentum to the downside. So let's check the narrative in the 4-hour time frame. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can see is how price returned down to the all-time high level, and we can see price reacted at this bearish fair value gap here, and we have the bearish movement of price to the downside. This is the bearish block mark from the daily time frame. Price returned to retest that. Last week I was expecting to see the possibility that this movement could go bullish to this candle wick before we have the possibility of bearish fall, or we could see price continue bullish. And don't forget, last week I told you guys this fact, that if price violates this block, then we're going to see price may journey more lower to seek this. And I told us if price violate this block, then want to see price trade violating it and a return to retest, and then we have the continuation. And clearly we can see that return to retest, which is a bearish fair value gap from the daily time frame, and you can see in reference is this institutional order flow zone. And now we can see how price retested that and continue bearish. So now for the coming week, since we are seeing that price is giving us bearish narrative to the downside, so what we have now is the fact that we have this unmitigated block here. So let's mark that out. So it means for the gold pair, I'll be expecting to see the possibility of price possibly trading here to the upside here before we have the continuation to the downside. So what we have is this bearish fair value gap. In confluence is this breakout block because we have this bullish movement that took out this high point and now price fell to the downside, breaking this low and also violating the bullish order block, which is now a bearish breakout block. So what we can see is a bearish fair value gap to that. So I want to see how price returns to this level and then look forward to a sell model in lower time frame to want to continue bearish to the downside. First, I'll be looking at this zone. The violation of this zone would now mean further bearish movement to the downside. So except possibly price decides now to trade from this level and just continue here, then I'll be looking at the possibility of price possibly giving us a buy model. And if price prints that buy model, then we may buy and see price prints a sell model, and then we continue bearish to the downside. So this is my expectation in the gold pair. So if we have price returning here, I want to look at a bearish model and then sell to the zone to look at how the zone would respect price or how the reaction would be here. If the reaction gets bullish here, then we go bullish, and if that zone gets violated, then we are strongly bearish to the downside. And if what we have is that price trades to this level, so we may look at the possibility that if price gives us a buy model, then we may trade what's bullish to the upside, either down to this zone here, and then look at the possibility of bearish movements. I would always emphasize this in trading. You all have to be open-minded to expect whatsoever may be happening in the markets. So if this is the delivery that occurs first, then I'll be looking at the possibility of a bearish model to continue now bearish to the downside. Looking at the reaction here to determine if we have a strong violation to just keep going bearish to the downside. But then if price decides to maybe just trade to this level and decides to give us bullish model, then let's go bullish and then look at the possibility of the zones established when this movement occurs. And then we may target those as our profits targets or allow price to trade more higher to this unmitigated institutional order flow zone. And then look at the possibility of price giving us a bearish movement to the downside again. Or we may see what's bullish continuation. I just want you guys to be open-minded. So guys, this is where we have to stop for the forecast for the coming week. Cheers and God bless you till I come your way next week.